I see that we start to have people joining the call. Good to see some people from Nova Scotia, from the USDA. We have some representatives from a small cooperative in Cincinnati, Ohio, as well as some of our Quebecois friends as well in Canada. Happy Saint Jean Baptiste Day to you. Happy that you're taking this festival day to enjoy the cooperative education and to learn a little bit more about building better food systems. With me today, I have Karen Zimbelman, Doug O'Brien, and Dami Odutola. So Doug O'Brien is the president and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association. Karen is the senior director of membership and cooperative relations at the National Co-op Grocers. You have a lot of responsibility there from what I can see in your title, Karen. And then Dami is the vice president at National Cooperative Bank, specifically in corporate banking there. So really, really happy to have you here today. Nice to see kind of a whole different round of expertise around the table to be discussing this conversation. And should you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or as well as interact in the chat or raise your hand. I would just like to thank our sponsors for this event, the 2021 ACE Institute. So Shared Capital Cooperative, huge thanks to them. The Ralph K. Morris Foundation, always a huge supporter of cooperative education, as well as the Minnesota Farmers Union. And with farmers unions, I understand that this morning we have a whole bunch of campers and staff from the Wisconsin Farmers Union. So a warm welcome to them today. And without further ado, I will hand it off to Doug O'Brien, who will moderate today's session. Thanks, Doug.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much. And I want to thank all the folks at ACE for hosting this really important and timely conversation today. I want to thank Greg Irving, who's with us. He's on the staff of NCBA CLUSA, who helped put together the panel today as well. And a shout out to Kathy Statz and all the campers there at Cap Kendall. Kathy, I don't know if you've shared with the campers that my kids are bemoaning the fact, I mean, literally just in these past week, that they're not with you this week or in this season. They've been to the camp there in the past, and they look forward to doing so in the future. So I'm sure you're having a great week again at Co-op Camp. Hello, everybody. I just want to start out. I'm going to start out with a few comments and some framing. We'll look at the agenda here in a second, and then we'll jump into a great presentation from Karen Zimbelman, and we'll have a panel conversation. I just want to talk to the audience and the folks who chose to participate today, and I want to thank you for choosing to be part of this conversation and to be choosing to be part of ACE. It's such a critical an essential function of the cooperative ecosystem. I know I don't need to tell folks in this audience, but that the continuous focus on education is simply, there's nothing more critical actually for the sustainability and the viability of co-ops. So thank you for everything that you do. First, a quick note on our panel for those that were looking at your program. I wanted to just point out that we are so fortunate to have Karen Zimbelman with us, affectionately known as KZ, to just about anybody I think who's crossed her path, and certainly in the co-op community over her storied really time of service and leadership within cooperatives. KZ is a former board member of ACE. She's a current director at NCBA CLUSA. I'm going to talk about NCBA CLUSA a little bit in just a bit. And actually just last week or 2 weeks ago was reelected to the executive committee again to NCBA CLUSA. And this year will be vetted and feted, I should say, as a Hall of Fame, as a member of the Co-op Hall of Fame. So KZ, it's so great to have you here. We also have Dami Odutola, who's just a well-known and highly respected person within the co-op community, and particularly, I think, within the food co-op system from the National Co-op Bank. So glad, Dami, that you're here to lend us your perspective and expertise. Greg, if you want to put up the slide on the agenda just real quickly. There's introductions. I have a little bit of framing. Then we'll have a presentation from KZ that show us a great example of what co-ops can really do and are doing in the food system. And then we're going to have a set of questions for me to the panelists and really a conversation about the topic, this fantastic topic that we have before us today. Then plenty of time for questions from the audience. So we're looking forward to that. And as Michael mentioned, please put your questions in the chat. And then I have Greg is helping me out, as well as Tamala Blaylock, our Vice President of Co-operations, and trying to sort through and make sure that we bring forth just a great conversation. So looking forward to all of that. So first, a quick note on the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. I'm sure most of this audience knows well about the 105-year-old Co-op Apex Association in the US. We do advocacy, we do public relations, we do development, we do thought leadership. And just in a couple of years ago, actually 5 years ago, we embraced a vision to complement our mission. Our mission, of course, is to advocate, promote, and defend the cooperative business model. Our vision, and it has been, and it was just essentially reconfirmed by our board a couple of weeks ago or last week, is to increase the ability of people to use cooperatives to build a more inclusive economy. And by that, we mean an economy that's more participatory, more sustainable, more equitable, more stable, and it grows for everyone. NCBA CLUSA, beyond the domestic work we do, we have been doing international work for the last 65 plus years. We've been in 80 different countries. Today, we're in 17 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, using the cooperative principles and values in international development. So that's NCBA CLUSA. We are a membership association. Thank you to all of those in the audience who choose to be members of NCBA CLUSA. And for those who are not, please consider doing so. So that's NCBA CLUSA. So I'd like to talk for just a couple minutes to frame today's discussion, and then we'll jump into the panel. First, we have to be express about the context. I know I'm sure it's been part of a lot of the conversation in this conference and certainly other conferences, but let's just put it right out there that what we've all been through in the last 15 months, in light of the disturbing revelations of this past year caused by COVID and a renewed focus on racial justice. COVID brought to light not only the inequities inherent in our public health and in the way that society treats its workers, it also put the food system in a new light, both in terms of its fragility and just who benefits and controls that food system. And then on May 25th of 2020, George Floyd was murdered, and the world witnessed racial brutality in a way that forced a much larger segment of society to reckon with the roots and the ravages of systemic racism. So in this context, the subject of this panel, harnessing cooperatives to build a better food system, could not be more timely. And I suppose a good place to start is asking just what better means. And I'll posit it means a food system that helps build a more inclusive economy, one that's truly participatory, that's equitable. And I'd also kind of put out there at the beginning of this conversation that cooperatives already play a huge role in nudging towards a better food system, but there is much more that can be done. And that's really going to be, I think, the subject of our conversation today. And while I want to get to KZ and Dami very quickly, I'm compelled to provide just a few data points to ground the conversation. This group here knows very well that cooperatives play a huge role in the food systems of the countries where we live. So let's consider the food chain and think about a few of those critical links. And I'm just going to very quickly think about the early stage part of that food system, which is focusing on farmer co-ops, and then we'll just touch on some of the co-ops that are closer to the consumers, and then hand it off to KZ. So here in the United States, we know that farmer co-ops play such a critical role. Couple data points. There's about 1.9 million farmers here in the United States. Well over half of all farmers are members of more or about 2,000 co-ops here in the US. There's more than 1 million ag co-ops across the globe. Farm co-ops here in the United States generate about $6.5 billion in net income every year. And more than well over a 250,000 people are employed by farmer-owned co-ops. The businesses owned and controlled by farmers play many different roles for those farmers, depending on the needs. Some focus on ensuring farmers can get the inputs they need, seed, energy, fertilizers. Farmers also use the co-op business model to use co-ops to band together to market their products at scale and with great sophistication. When one steps back and really considers the impact and influence of cooperatives in this part of the food system, it's actually pretty astounding. Depending on the sector, perhaps around 50% of all ag goods flow through a cooperative at some point. With dairy, maybe the greatest of up to 80% of all milk flows through a cooperative at some point. And then further down the chain, people use co-ops much closer to the consumer, whether that is independent grocery store owners coming together for purchasing grocery store products like Wakefern Food Corp with 354 retail establishments and a revenue of $13 billion that includes brands like ShopRite and PriceRite, or consumer-owned food cooperatives like the one where I'm a member right here in Tacoma Park, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., and that I shop at a couple times a week at our food co-op. And so I just looked at the National Co-op Business 2020 edition of the Co-op 100. Folks here, many of you know that Dami's bank, the National Co-op Bank, every year they put out this list of the 100 biggest co-ops. And I saw that 7 of the 10 biggest cooperatives in the US are in the food system, including CHS as the biggest with nearly $32 billion in revenue. So my point is that people already use co-ops in the food system, and that means people already own, control, and receive the benefits from their businesses. But in today's context, we need to go deeper and ask ourselves, what else can we do to harness the power of the co-op business model to build a better food system? And with that, I want to hand this over to KZ, who will help us go deeper into one really important facet of the co-op food system, and one that I believe can serve as a model for others who are looking to use cooperatives in the food system and to build a better food system. So KZ, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Thank you very much, Doug, for quite an introduction. Hearing a little bit of feedback, I'm going to just try to ignore it. So thank you very much for including me. I'm a 35 plus year member of ACE and really tickled to be here. Really enjoy the forum that ACE provides to bring cooperators together and have great conversations. NCG, the National Co-op Grocers, I'll say a little bit about who we are in a second, but just want to note that this is a report that we produced looking back at 2020. It's been out for a couple months now, but we look at a wide range of factors that define how we are trying to improve the ecosystem that we operate in, if you will. This is a really high-level summary of what that report covers. And so I'm really happy to share it with you. It is publicly available on our welcome to the table.coop website. If any of you are interested in drilling down, and once I'm not talking, I will post the link to this report in that in the chat. Next slide, please, Greg. So NCG is a co-op. Our members are retail food co-ops. It says here we have 147 members, but we actually have a new member that came in just a month ago, 148 retail food grocery stores that are members of NCG. They operate 217 grocery stores around the US, just US based. And what NCG does is we provide purchasing co-op functions. So we aggregate the business volume from all of these food co-ops to help them better compete, get them better prices on services or on goods. We also do things that are not traditional purchasing co-op functions, such as marketing, such as branding, training programs. We have an extensive learning management system we call Co-op U that provides training programs for co-op staff and business development services. A co-op like Tacoma Park, Silver Springs, the one that Doug mentioned, if it wanted to open a second store or if it wanted to relocate, we have staff who can help with that, with those services. And I'll make small allusions to this occasionally today, but in 2016, we did a really broad range survey of our member co-ops and asked them how they were doing on, I think it was about 40 to 50 different factors. And we picked 8 or 9 of those factors and said, let's set goals as a group, as a system. And by 2020, let's set a goal for 2020. And so a lot of this report is us reflecting back on the goal that we set and how we're doing in 7 of those areas. So this report is based on that. And we can go to the next slide. So we start, one of the things that food co-ops really care about is supporting and using and making available locally produced food. That means food that's grown locally or that is manufactured locally. We feel like it offers better quality food. It builds a stronger economic system, arguably, potentially lower carbon footprint. There are people who disagree about that, but in any case, 22% of the sales from the co-ops in our system, the 147, because that's who was included in the survey, the 147 US food co-ops, 22% of their sales were from products produced by local vendors. And the average co-op works with 185 local farmers and producers. You will not find anything like that in the rest of the grocery industry because it takes a lot of time to work with each of those local farmers and producers. And it's true that time costs. It takes more staffing. It takes more hours of time to process the invoices, to receive the product, all of those kinds of things. Well, it really became obvious to us when COVID hit and the shutdown started to happen that this really made a difference. Our co-ops had relationships with these suppliers who suddenly had no way to get their products out. So we saw dairy farmers dumping gallons and gallons and gallons of milk. We saw farmers plowing in their fields produce that was ready to go to market. They had to just plow it under. But our co-ops, where our co-ops were working with some of those vendors, they were able to say, bring us all those eggs, bring, as much as you can provide, we will try to get it out there. And in some cases at very good prices for the consumers because the farmers were going to lose it anyway. But it was much better to at least get the product into consumers' hands than to plow it under. Nobody wanted to do that. So we feel like having the relationship with local producers really demonstrated the resilience that we're trying to achieve by supporting local. Next slide. Another goal that we set is about making good food affordable, and nearly 40% of NCG's food co-op stores, 81 of them, are located in communities that do experience some sort of food insecurity at rates higher than the national average. So one of the things we do, the main things we do is we negotiate with food manufacturers and provide specials. So those specials, we call them co-op deals, save consumers in the course of a year 25% on their shopping budgets when they're purchasing those products over the course of the year. That combined purchasing power gives us a chance to offer lower prices. We also do this we also have a program called Co-op Basics, that has over 2,000 products in it. These are products that we call in the industry EDLP prices, everyday low prices. So they're not special. They don't go on special for 2 weeks and then go back to their regular price. every day they are at that $1.19 for a can of beans or whatever the price might be. So these are products that are always on those special prices. And we negotiate with various producers to make sure that we've got some higher quality. Sometimes they're organic, sometimes they're natural produced, sometimes fair trade certified, but a variety of products that we can offer at really great prices as much as possible, even for small independent retail. Next slide. Another goal is to provide healthy food access. And, we don't want our food co-ops and the retail food co-op system that we are a part of, definitely more affluent, more located in more affluent communities. That's what its roots are. That's where we are today. But we want to make sure that that's not just what we're serving and what we do. So we challenged our co-ops. In 2016, we had 45% of our co-ops that offered healthy food access programs. That means some kind of discount if you have SNAP benefits or any kind of low income food subsidy benefit. There's a program called Double Up Food Bucks, where people who have a food buck of this type can get 2 for 1 for any fresh fruit or vegetable that they produce. It's a federal program, but we help our co-ops navigate the intricacies of a federal program like that. And so by 2020, 76%, 3 out of 4 of our co-ops were offering some kind of healthy food access program. We set a goal. Our goal in 2016 was that we get to 100%. We didn't get there, but we're happy with the progress, over almost double, what we had in 2016. Next slide. And we recognize that good food is really, us offering good food is just the beginning. We know that the co-op principles say we have concern for community. We buy into that. That's an important aspect of who we are. So we challenged our co-ops to make some kind of contribution to their local community. It was 0.2% of sales in terms of charitable contributions in 2016. We said, let's get to 0.5% of sales. We got to 0.46. We didn't quite make our goal, but we more than doubled what we were doing in 2016. So we're really proud of that. Co-ops making contributions, co-ops donating staff time to local food banks, whatever it might be, just a really wide range of contributions to their local communities. Next slide. NCG strongly believes in doing what we can, taking the resources that we have and leveraging them to build a more racially just food system. And this is not easy to do. We started with some investments or contributions, if you will, that are listed here on this slide, like, for instance, supporting the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which when COVID shut down, they took produce produced by their farmers and put them into lunch boxes or grocery bags, and distributed them a food bag program. We helped support that. Variety of contributions that we've made. I'll take the next slide just as a really quick overview of NCG's own DEI journey, which we began in earnest in 2017. The green items highlight the work that we're doing internally, the structural changes that we're making. The orange are sort of the training and development work we're doing with our staff. And then the purple represent areas where we're trying to bring other co-ops, our member co-ops, along a little bit more. And we're really just scratching the surface of this, but we're trying to get there. In terms of one of the measures, we look at what percentage of co-op staff are from an ethnic minority, representative of some kind of ethnic minority. And in 2016, it was 17%. We set the goal of being closer to what the US Census says is that population in the US, which is 40%. We didn't move that needle, and we're very disappointed to see that those results, and we're really challenging our co-ops to figure out how they can get better at that. Next slide. One thing that we are doing, though, is looking at how we can leverage our resources again to support a more diverse producers in the food system. So we are just starting. Our primary supplier is United Natural Foods. We've challenged them, and they are working on labeling the products in their catalog. Which items are meet the criteria of being some kind of diverse criteria, which means at least 51% owned by a systemically underrepresented person or group. And then we're providing some of the marketing materials, such as the signage, to help co-ops label those products in their stores. And we'll start working on promotions programs, more consumer information about these products, those kinds of things. We're just scratching the surface. That supplier that I mentioned, United Natural Foods, today, the items that they have listed in their catalog that are owned by some that we would call the inclusive trade criteria group, is 2% of their sales. So we have some benchmarks today that we can start measuring against. And next slide. Really quickly, we look at how we compare in terms of sales of organic, sales of fair trade. There's something in the US, I think, and Canadian companies also participate in what's called Certified B Corp. Those are businesses that commit to having a focus that's not just on profit, but on also people and planet, a triple bottom line focus. So you can see the comparison, what the trade at 3% of sales in the grocery industry is organic, 32% in the natural industry, 47% with our co-ops. You can see those kinds of things as well. We include cooperatively produced items here. It's a very much smaller percent, but we're starting to identify who some of those cooperative producers are and how many our co-ops use. And we just learned in this most recent survey that our co-ops, on average, have 14 cooperatively produced items from 14 cooperatively owned companies in their stores, like Equal Exchange, like some of the other, Organic Valley, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Really quickly, I have just a couple more things. Looking at climate and sustainability impacts, more traditionally with the climate kind of focus, we've been challenging our co-ops to get better at lowering their carbon footprint. Since 2012, NCG has participated with an international group in what we call Co-op Forest, and we've planted almost 2 million trees to offset the travel related to staff travel, as well as the travel for any of our co-op participants for any of our events. In 2016, we were looking at 54 kilowatt hours per square foot of electricity. Our goal was to get it down to 46. We actually got to 33 in 2020. So we're really proud of the fact that our members really are focused on how they can get better in many of these areas. The story is not all rosy on all factors, but it really is better. We're getting better. Next slide. One other factor that we look at is, I think I already did that one. I forgot to tell you, Greg, sorry. So we look at also livable wages, what it takes to pay our staff livable wages so that they can make a career in their work at the co-op. Note that this picture is from pre-COVID days, by the way. In 2016, 67% of our co-ops were paying livable wages, and by 2020 it was up to 74%. We wanted it to get to 80, but we didn't get there. But we also measure access to healthcare benefits and that kind of thing. I'll keep rolling. I think the last slide is that we just want to shout out, and we dedicated this report this year to the essential food system workers in all of our co-ops. We would not have made it through so much of what we went through without their heroic efforts in this past year. And there, I'll just leave it and turn it over to Doug for questions and comments.
Thank you, KZ. Thank you very much. And you can take down the slide, Greg. I think it was really important to spend that time on a particular co-op, which is NCG is a co-op. It's a co-op of co-ops, of course, on how they have how they've used their cooperative identity to really improve and to continually improve and to keep themselves accountable to improving the food system. So it's great stuff. Thank you. So I'm going to jump into some questions with KZ and Dami. And Dami, I'm going to start with you. And we kind of, in some of my comments at top, we talked about the climate we find ourselves in 2021. You focus on the economy, particularly the economy as it affects cooperatives and their viability. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of cooperatives in our current business climate, Dami?
Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you everybody for inviting me, Ace. I appreciate the invite. Thank you, KZ, for that beautiful presentation. That was awesome. I just wanted to keep quiet and keep listening to it. A lot of data points. But to your question, and talking about the strengths and weaknesses of co-ops. I mean, everybody knows 2020 was a great year, to say the least. It was a different year due to the pandemic. But what we found out that was the biggest strength, or parts of the strength for co-ops, was the fact that they were very, very, a lot of them were nimble. Even though they still had the issues that were going on, they were able to take advantage of that period to make quick decisions, turn things around. I mean, everybody did, but the good thing about me was that I was able to see a lot of people doing the same thing at the same time, but they were, turning things around faster than we thought. They implemented a lot of, during that period, there were so many things that had to be done over a short period of time for them to stay in business. And it was fast, and it was unbelievable. Maybe some of the larger corporations might not have been able to do that, but that was not the same for co-ops. And then, one of the other strengths that they exhibited during that period, and that we saw in the current climate, is they're very resilient. Co-ops are extremely resilient. I also like the fact that, I call this the feedback loop, ownership and the democratic control of a co-op. I like it, and I think it was one of the things that helped them a lot during this period, because you own the store and or the co-op, and what you do is, because you own it, you provide a lot of feedback immediately, and things are implemented faster. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we cannot overemphasize is the fact that without being local, a lot of co-ops might have gone out of business. When KZ was talking about giving her presentation, she mentioned local. She mentioned how co-ops work with farmers, that they brought back the produce and the products that they had. The supply chain was affected during the pandemic, and it's still a little bit affected now because of what is going on, but because you had um, a range of farmers. I can't remember the number. I think it was 185, you said, KZ, that each co-op store or location worked with. You were able to still tap into that supply chain, and your food is not coming from outside your area. So it was just, I mean, that part of it, and the fact that the communities worked together to be able to solve the problems, to think about stuff. Casey's last slide was about um, the heroes that we call the grocery workers. You know, they were just phenomenal in reaching out and making sure the supply chain continued. There were so many co-ops that we heard from, you know, because we were in a lot of them, you know, we're doing business with them, and we had to check up on them. You know, how are you doing, to make sure that everything was working, and they were full of praises for their workers, you know, and all of them are also local. So you cannot overemphasize, you know, local, from the workers to the farmers to how the decisions were made, and having the community support. And lastly, one other thing I wanted to mention was leadership. You know, there were a lot of people that stood up during this period, and it generated a lot of leaders during that period who went on to do, who are still doing a lot of various things now, just because they were able to rise up through that community or the co-op, and become leaders today. The last but not the least is weaknesses, right? I also say that part of our strengths are also some of our weaknesses, you know. So some of the time, you know, everything that affected everybody else also affected the co-ops, you know. So like economic situations, the pandemic, regulations, all these things affect everybody, but they also affect co-ops. But sometimes our decision-making process can be slowed down a little bit, because we like just because of the nature of our ownership, we have to take into consideration a lot of steps and a lot of people to be able to make decisions. And that was part of, or that's one of the weaknesses that we see. And also the pandemic and going forward also slowed down, also highlighted the fact that there's a missing component of technology, you know, with some of the co-ops, that, you know, there's a lot that's happened between when the pandemic hit and now, but there's still a lot to be desired in that sector. And the last thing is, during that period, a lot of co-ops ran out. They I won't say ran out of cash, but because of who we are and how we run our businesses, we have patronage, right? And the patronage that we pay out doesn't allow us to keep a lot of cash equity in the business, which might have been helpful during the pandemic and shortly after. But a lot of co-ops survived it. They're doing better. There were a lot of programs that were done that we were able to help to administer to some of the co-ops. So a lot of them have turned around, and things are looking.
And Dami, if I might pick up on that just very quickly, I want to hand it right to KZ. Is the co-ops in the food system, NCG, other food co-ops, ag co-ops, they were part of the advocacy effort to make sure that co-ops could participate in the economic disaster assistance that came, you know, in March of April at the beginning of the pandemic. NCBA CLUSA was really, and we got data that last week that that co-ops leveraged $1.9 billion in that assistance to pay the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL. Thousands and thousands of co-ops including, but that was part of the co-ops all coming together, because if we didn't, there's a good chance a lot of co-ops wouldn't have been eligible for that. and we continue to refine that. But KZ, I want to go to you, kind of the same question on, and then I'll just expand on it. It's pretty much the same question on the gaps in the needs in the contemporary food system. What might be needed for co-ops to serve better than their competitors. So that's another turn on strength and weaknesses.
Well, I think that that our relationship with suppliers, local suppliers, as well as thinking about how we can contribute to more resilience within the food system, the producers, the distributors, it's a big system, that having, as a group, having identity and having a relationship with everyone in that system really strengthens our position and gives us a chance to give consumers access to products that are not being pushed on them, right? I mean, that's part of what co-ops got started doing, was to provide an alternative to for essential services that was not manipulative. It's not, we're being told you must buy this, or if you want flour, you can only get this really crappy flour that's been cut with, because it's the company store. But we put consumers in the ownership position. So that's, I think, something that our co-op, retail co-op, can really contribute in terms of a stronger food system. Gaps, I mean, I think Dami mentioned one of them. We can be very conservative. I mean, we are conservative by nature. We have thousands of owners. It's not easy for us to say what is in the best interest of those thousands of owners, as it is for a sole proprietorship or if a small family-owned business to say, bing, we're going to grab that real estate over there on that side of town and we're going to sign the lease tomorrow. It's hard. It takes longer for our food co-ops to do that. But I think that one of the things that we saw that co-ops did through COVID especially was that they pivoted so quickly to putting up plexiglass barriers, to thinking about what that meant, to taking down their prepared foods departments. A lot. I mean, that's where a lot of their money is made. It hurt. It was really painful. We have 40% of our staff sometimes are involved in that prepared food department. They were still paying their wages. They had to figure out how to get them busy in other areas, or they just were subsidizing wages that really drained their cash. But they did it. They didn't say, no, we're not going to do that. They said, this is what we have to do. We have to continue to do that. Let's see, you also asked for needs. I think healthy food access programming continues to be a big need. We need to challenge ourselves, I think, the retail food co-ops, to figure out how we can do more in terms of getting healthy food into everyone's hands and really step up in that way.
That's great. Okay, thanks, KZ. And I'm noticing time, and so I want to shift to a question or two from the audience. And we certainly can, we might come back and talk about a couple other things, but we want to respect everybody's time and keep this session to an hour. There's I see some questions in the Q&A, which is great. You can drop them in the chat as well. And I am going to pick up on one from one of the attendees, and it's on Indigenous American Indian inclusion in the co-op food system. And I'll ask both KZ and Dami about. There was a great session earlier this week at ACE Institute talking about that topic. I'll just do a really quick plug that NCBA CLUS and the Cooperative Development Foundation actually has a conference the first week of August on this topic, how co-ops or how Native American communities can use cooperatives in their food system. So take a look at at NCBA CLUS website. You can sign up for that. But I'll ask maybe KZ or Jump Ball, Dami, if you want to jump in. Any experience or work with tribal communities on food system?
Well, I can just say quickly from NCG's perspective, I mean, we're trying to identify who are the suppliers that we could potentially be working with. Certainly of those 185 average number of locally produced food items, local producers that each of our co-ops works with, there's in different communities, there are some of those are indigenously owned or produce items, but not, you know, we just don't have the data. Certainly we encourage our co-ops to do that. I think most of them try their best where they can. But as a system, you know, we're trying to just find out who are those producers, where are they, how are they distributing their products, how can we promote those products, how can we spotlight them, and that applies to indigenous as well as other categories. But you know, we think it builds resilience in our food system to spotlight producers like that.
Yeah, and we're excited to have, actually, we'll have KZ's CEO, CE Pugh, is going to participate in the conference in August. Dami, anything to add on working with Indigenous Native American communities, American Indian?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work with Native Americans, but it's not a lot in the food system, you know. There are a lot of companies that we support and we finance, but not just in the food system that much. But you know, the funny thing I wanted to bring up was you had, first of all, two things. Yes, kudos to NCBA and NCG and everybody that made PPP work for the co-ops. It's very, very important. It's, I mean, I look at the numbers again. Please understand that I'm a numbers guy. I look at the numbers and I see what PPP was able to do for a lot of co-ops. So, Doug, to you and to NCG, kudos, and to everybody. I mean, I know NCB also played a huge role in trying to make sure that co-ops were involved. And then quickly about the food system in Native communities. You know, there was a day I went to Wakefern. By the way, we also finance Wakefern, and we were touring one of the stores, and I found out that a lot of the seafood comes from Alaska. I mean, it's just amazing. So I don't know if there's an opportunity for co-ops out there to work with them in what Casey was referring to in terms of like distribution, because they actually fly them in. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. But we don't directly work with a lot of like the food systems there. I know there's a co-op in Sitka. I've been talking to them about Up and Coming and all of that. So.
Right. Well, good. Well, thank you, Dami. Thanks for that response. I'll take another one from the audience, and then I have an exit on kind of the future of co-ops and the food systems for both of you. But I do want to take this first one, and it's about the critical links in the food chain. And this is from one of our Canadian colleagues, co-operators, and it's a consultant who's been working to make those links and synergies with co-ops in the U.S. In this case, to help marketing organic feed corn, which I know it's a huge issue in the U.S. too, finding enough organic feed corn. This person's in Southeast Quebec, and asking about how to make those linkages. And I wanted to surface this question just a little bit to talk about Principle 6 for just a quick moment. Principle 6 in the food system. We've been, since I've been CEO for about 4 years. In fact, KZ and the other directors from the United States 2 years ago, we're in Quebec City for the CMC annual consumer co-op, and as well as their board meeting, and had a wonderful exchange. And we've been working more and more with our Canadian counterparts to look for those linkages, and we look forward to growing that through CMC and St. Mary's University and others. And I think that question also points out the potential, KZ talked about it too, of co-ops being deliberate and thoughtful about sourcing, from co-ops within the cooperative ecosystem. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to help, those firms that are owned and controlled by the people who use the business, of course. So I'll respond more specifically, I think, to my Canadian friend on her particular question there, or his particular question. We're at 11:54, and I did want to talk about the future and ask Dami and KZ about the potential. What could we be doing to make sure that all the different stakeholders and the players in the food systems, from the consumers to the farmers to the people who work in the food system, are able to use the cooperative business model, to make it better. And here's a hint: education might be a good part of your answer.
Casey, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, since my own role is on the side of the financing of co-ops, what I would want to say, what I would see in co-ops going forward is that they play very, very, very critical role in the food system, and especially because of the role that they play in local. And I always say to someone, I said, you have to be able to do well before you can do good. So there are a few things that you have to do, just like you rightly said, Doug. The first thing is to educate your members, to get the word out there, not just your members, because as co-ops, most of us, we like talking to each other, but I always say that we should get the message out on what we're doing. And I see co-ops playing a very, very, very major role, because things are coming. I mean, when I say things, a lot of the companies that you see are, trying to form communities to be able to do things to be able to do things. So to me, it's a form of co-op. They might not call themselves co-ops, but it's a form of co-op. And I think that in the future, we'll see a major role for co-ops. So education, getting out there, getting involved in your local communities, also doing whatever it is that you're doing it very well. So if you're a co-op store, making sure that it's being run extremely well. If it's an educational system or a school, make sure that you're doing the right thing and doing it extremely well, so that we're not just co-ops because we're co-ops, but we're co-ops because we're doing things extremely very well. So
that makes sense. Thank you, Dami. KZ?
Well, I just go back to cooperation, to working together, to figuring out how we can continue to be strong locally owned businesses and all that we're committed to there, by being a stronger system. And it's a very fine, delicate balancing act. More margin, more mission, definitely. Better operators means that the customer experience is better and more people are attracted to the store, but that comes at a cost also. More margin means more dollars into the pockets of the employees, to the producers. We can pay the producers better, but it also means the consumers are paying us more. So, we're owned by the consumers, and we have to balance those interests. And it's challenging. We do think that cooperation and working together, that we are stronger together, and making sure everyone understands that the education side of things is really critical. We also just recognize at NCG level that we need to get better at technology. We are just really, we're being left in the dust in terms of the industry, and customer expectations have more technology interface even for groceries. So that's just something we have to work on.
Yeah, I think those are great comments when we look at the future, and that. I'll pick up on that technology. I want to talk about education just for a second. Dami, talked about, that sometimes that dynamic of cooperatives and their, you know, whether it's the capital reserves or the ability to access outside capital, you know, we know that that's as a business that in its genes, they put outside investors, you know, secondary. The result of that is you know, is getting that capital to invest in something like IT, you know, and there's a huge upfront investment in making sure that you have IT, and then a continual investment. So I do see that as a challenge, but it's imperative, you know, that it's absolutely imperative, just as you said, KZ. To both Dami and KZ's point on, you know, the bicycle that we all need to ride as cooperatives, you know, meeting our mission, maybe, you know, essentially the seventh principle, but being viable and growing. So you have that margin so you can meet the mission on both sides of that bicycle. The way to grow and to be viable and successful is continual education, deeper education, innovating the way that we educate with technology, et cetera. It's just so critical. So that I'll just finish and say, you know, thank you to this audience and to ACE, and for continuing the legacy of the Institute because of the criticality of, you know, of this work for the cooperative movement, and including in the food system. Michael, I see you're back. I just want to thank Dami and KZ and ACE and everyone. It was a fantastic conversation today.
Thank you, everyone.
Go campers. Have a great week, campers.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Dami. Thank you, Doug. Excellent moderation, and thank you, KZ as well, if I may. It was a really great session, great conversation. It'll be recorded and we'll be sure to share that, but appreciate everyone for the active conversation in the chat as well. So just another thank you to our sponsors, Ralph K. Morris Foundation, Shared Capital Cooperative, and lastly, the Minnesota Farmers Union. Thank you to the campers who attended today. It's always great to have some young educators and future educators among us. And with that, ACE will be hosting an open mic in about an hour. It'll be at this same link, so feel free to join. If you have anything you want to share about your cooperative, that is the way to do it. Karen has just put her email in the chat. If you would like to connect with her directly, please feel free to do that. And then Karen as well, if you would like to send the slides to me, I can share them to those who participated in the event today. With that, we have our last two concurrent sessions this afternoon. One will be in French with simultaneous translation, and then one will be from our partners in Puerto Rico, talking about electric co-ops in Puerto Rico. So really looking forward to those two sessions. They start at 2:30 Eastern. Same link. And with that, I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your afternoon if you're on Eastern time now. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.